My husband grabbed the microphone at our 25th anniversary party. The whole family watched. "Let's be honest," he laughed. "I made the money. She just changed diapers. She is lucky I kept her." The hotel owner, a billionaire who had been watching from the shadows, stepped onto the stage. He snatched the mic from my husband and said, "She isn't lucky. She is the one who got away. I've been waiting 25 years for you to make a mistake like this. I'm glad to have you here. Follow my story until the end and comment the city you're watching from, so I can see how far my story has reached." I should have known something was wrong the moment I saw Easton adjusting his tie in that particular way, the same way he did before important business presentations. 25 years of marriage teaches you to read the signs, even when you wish you couldn't. The Grand Meridian Ballroom sparkled around us, every surface gleaming under the massive crystal chandeliers. White lilies, my favorite flowers, though Easton had chosen them because they photographed well, filled enormous vases throughout the room. The scent was almost overwhelming, sweet and cloying, mixing with the expensive perfumes of our 200 guests. I smoothed my hands over the blue silk dress I'd chosen so carefully. Easton had barely glanced at it when I'd shown him earlier, too busy reviewing his speech notes. I'd spent 3 hours at the salon that morning, wanting to look perfect for our anniversary celebration. 25 years, a quarter of a century. It should have felt like an achievement. Instead, as I watched Easton glad hand his business associates and their wives, I felt invisible. Again. The children, though at 23 and 20 I suppose I should stop calling them that, had flown in for the occasion. Michael stood near the bar with his girlfriend, looking uncomfortable in his rented tuxedo. Sarah chatted with her college friends at a table near the back, barely acknowledging my presence when I'd tried to join their conversation earlier. When had I become a stranger in my own family? The thought was interrupted by the sharp tapping of metal against crystal. Easton stood at the small stage the hotel had set up, microphone in hand, that familiar, confident smile spreading across his face. The room gradually quieted, conversations fading to expectant murmurs. "Ladies and gentlemen," his voice boomed through the speakers, and I felt that old flutter of pride I'd always felt when he commanded a room. "Thank you all for joining Antoinette and me tonight as we celebrate 25 wonderful years of marriage." Applause filled the ballroom, and I managed to smile, clasping my hands together to stop them from trembling. This was it. Our moment. Our celebration of everything we'd built together. "You know," Easton continued, his tone shifting to something more casual, more intimate, "I've been thinking about what makes a marriage work, what makes it last through all the ups and downs." I leaned forward slightly, curious despite myself. We'd never really talked about what made our marriage work. We just existed together, parallel lives that occasionally intersected. "And I realized," Easton said, his smile widening as scattered chuckles rippled through the crowd, "it comes down to knowing your roles, understanding who brings what to the table." Something cold settled in my stomach. The way he said it, the slight emphasis on certain words. It felt wrong. Calculated. "Let's be honest here," Easton's voice carried easily through the suddenly silent room. "I made the money. I built the business. I provided the lifestyle we all enjoy." He gestured broadly at the opulent ballroom, at the designer gowns and expensive suits surrounding us. "Antoinette, well, she changed diapers." The words hit me like a physical blow. I actually felt my breath catch, felt the color drain from my face as the room erupted in uncomfortable laughter. Not real laughter, the kind of forced chuckling people do when they're witnessing something they shouldn't be witnessing. But Easton wasn't finished. "She is lucky I kept her," he said, and this time his smile looked sharp, predatory. "Really? What else would she do? She has no skills, no education that matters. She's been living off my success for 25 years. The room had gone completely silent now. Even the waitstaff had stopped moving, frozen in place like extras in a movie who'd forgotten their blocking. I could feel hundreds of eyes on me, feel the weight of their pity and embarrassment pressing down like a physical force. My hands were shaking now, my vision blurring as tears threatened to spill over. 25 years of my life reduced to diaper changing and lucky breaks. 25 years of supporting his dreams, raising his children, managing his household, being the perfect wife, all of it dismissed with casual cruelty in front of everyone we knew. I started to stand, needing to escape, needing to find somewhere to hide and process what had just happened. But before I could take a single step, another voice cut through the silence. "Excuse me." The voice was calm, controlled, but it carried an authority that made everyone turn, including Easton. I turned too, and felt my heart stop completely. Landon Blackwood stood at the edge of the stage, tall and silver-haired and completely unchanged in all the ways that mattered. 25 years had been kind to him. He'd grown into his angular features, his dark eyes more commanding than ever. He wore a perfectly tailored black suit that probably cost more than most people's cars, but he moved with the same quiet confidence he'd had as a struggling design student. What was he doing here? How was he here? Then I remembered. The Grand Meridian was his hotel. He owned the entire chain now. Landon Blackwood Hotels, with properties on 4 continents. I'd read about his success in magazines over the years, always with a mixture of pride and regret I'd never been able to fully examine. Easton blinked, his confidence faltering for the first time all evening. "I'm sorry. Who are you?" Landon stepped onto the stage with fluid grace, reaching for the microphone. "I'm Landon Blackwood. I own this hotel." His voice was pleasant, conversational, but there was steel underneath it. "And I need to interrupt your speech." Easton pulled the microphone back, his jaw tightening. You're in the middle of humiliating a remarkable woman," Landon said, his voice carrying clearly without amplification. "And I won't allow that to continue in my establishment." The ballroom had become a theater, every guest riveted by the drama unfolding on stage. I sat frozen, my heart pounding so hard I was sure everyone could hear it. Landon gently but firmly took the microphone from Easton's hand. When he spoke again, his voice filled the room with quiet authority. "Ladies and gentlemen, I apologize for interrupting this celebration, but I think you should know something about the woman this man just insulted." He turned to look directly at me, and something in his expression made my breath catch. It was the same look he'd given me all those years ago when he'd asked me to marry him. The same look I'd turned away from because Easton represented safety, security, everything I thought I needed. "Antoinette isn't lucky," Landon said, his eyes never leaving mine. "She isn't fortunate to have been kept by anyone. She is the one who got away. And I've been waiting 25 years for the man who won her to make exactly this kind of mistake." The silence that followed was absolute. No one moved, no one breathed, no one seemed capable of processing what they'd just heard. Easton's face had gone from confident to confused to something approaching panic. "What? What are you talking about? Who are you to her?" Landon finally looked away from me, turning to face my husband with an expression I couldn't quite read. "I'm the man who loved her first. The man who would have spent every day of the last 25 years making sure she knew exactly how extraordinary she is." The microphone fell from Easton's limp fingers, hitting the stage with a sharp screech of feedback that made half the room wince. But I barely heard it over the roaring in my ears, the way my entire world had just shifted on its axis. Landon loved me first. Was still. Did he still? "Antoinette," Landon said, stepping to the edge of the stage, extending his hand toward me. "Would you like to get some air? I think we have a lot to talk about." I looked at his outstretched hand, then at Easton's stricken face, then at the sea of shocked expressions surrounding us. 200 people waiting to see what I would do, waiting to see if I would take the hand being offered to me or stay seated in the chair where I'd just been publicly humiliated. For the first time in 25 years, the choice was entirely mine. I stood up, my legs somehow steady despite the earthquake happening inside my chest. I walked toward the stage, toward Landon's waiting hand, toward a future I couldn't even begin to imagine. Behind me, I heard Easton's voice, small and panicked. "Antoinette, don't you dare! Don't you dare walk away from me!" But I was already walking, and for the first time in decades, I wasn't looking back. The cool night air hit my face like a benediction as Landon led me through the hotel's private entrance, away from the stares and whispers that had followed us out of the ballroom. My hand was still in his, and I couldn't bring myself to let go. It felt like an anchor in a storm I hadn't even realized was brewing. We walked in silence through the hotel's elegant corridors until he stopped at a set of glass doors that opened onto a private terrace overlooking the city. The lights of downtown stretched out below us, and for the first time in hours, I could breathe properly. "Are you all right?" Landon asked softly, finally releasing my hand. I almost laughed at the absurdity of the question. Was I all right? My husband had just humiliated me in front of 200 people, and the man I'd chosen not to marry 25 years ago had just declared his love for me in the same breath. All right seemed like a foreign concept. "I don't know," I said honestly, wrapping my arms around myself. The evening was warm, but I felt cold down to my bones. "I don't know anything anymore." Landon shrugged out of his jacket and draped it over my shoulders without asking. It smelled like expensive cologne and something else, something that brought back a flood of memories I'd been suppressing for decades. "You were studying industrial design," he said quietly, and I startled at the unexpected direction of his thoughts. "At Northwestern. You were the most talented student in our program." My throat tightened. Nobody had mentioned my design work in years. Not since I'd packed away my portfolio and easel to become Mrs. Easton Crawford, full-time wife and mother. "That was a long time ago," I managed. "Not so long that I've forgotten the lamp design you created for Professor Williams' class, the one with the curved glass base that caught light from 3 different angles." Landon's voice was warm with remembered admiration. He said it was the most innovative piece he'd seen in 15 years of teaching. I closed my eyes, remembering. I'd been so proud of that lamp, so excited about the possibilities it represented. I'd had plans, sketches for an entire line of lighting fixtures that would revolutionize residential design. I was going to change the way people thought about illumination in their homes. Instead, I'd gotten pregnant with Michael and married Easton, and those sketches had ended up in a box in our attic, forgotten like so many other dreams. "Why are you here, Landon?" I asked, needing to redirect the conversation before the memories became too painful. "I mean, I know you own the hotel, but tonight? Why tonight?" He was quiet for a long moment, looking out over the city. When he finally spoke, his voice was careful, measured. "I've been keeping track of you, Antoinette. Not in a stalking way," he added quickly, seeing my expression. "But you were the love of my life. When someone matters that much to you, you don't just forget they exist." The love of his life. The word sent a shock through my system that I wasn't prepared for. "I knew about the anniversary party," he continued. "I knew Easton had booked the ballroom. I told myself I wouldn't interfere, wouldn't insert myself into your life. But then I heard him practicing his speech this afternoon. My stomach dropped. You heard. He was in the presidential suite, going over his remarks with his assistant. The walls aren't as soundproof as guests think they are." Landon's jaw tightened. He was laughing about it, Antoinette, about how he was going to put you in your place in front of everyone, about how you'd gotten too comfortable lately, needed to be reminded of your position in the marriage. The words hit me like physical blows. Easton had planned it, had scripted my humiliation, rehearsed it, anticipated my reaction like a business presentation. 25 years of marriage, and he'd reduced our relationship to a power play. "I couldn't let it happen," Landon said simply. "I couldn't stand there and watch him destroy you without fighting back." Fighting back. When was the last time anyone had fought for me? When was the last time I'd fought for myself? The answer came with brutal clarity. Never. I'd never fought for anything I wanted. I'd always chosen the safe path, the expected path, the path of least resistance. Like choosing Easton over Landon. The memory hit me with sudden, devastating force. I was 21 again, standing in my tiny apartment near campus, staring at two very different proposals. Literally. Both men had proposed to me within a week of each other. Landon had been passionate, romantic, down on one knee in the campus sculpture garden with a ring he'd designed himself. A simple band with a small diamond surrounded by tiny pieces of colored glass arranged like a sunburst. He'd been broke, surviving on instant noodles and student loans. But his eyes had burned with certainty when he'd told me he loved me. "I don't have much to offer you right now," he'd said, his voice shaking with emotion. "But I'll spend every day of my life making sure you never regret saying yes." Easton's proposal had come 3 days later, in an expensive restaurant downtown. His ring was a traditional solitaire, 2 carats, flawless. He'd talked about security, about the life he could provide, about my future being safe with him. He'd had a plan, a 5-year timeline for his career advancement, a projected income chart, a list of neighborhoods where we'd look for houses. I'd chosen the plan. I'd chosen security over passion, certainty over possibility. I'd convinced myself it was the mature decision, the smart decision. I'd been such a fool. "Do you remember the project we worked on together?" Landon asked suddenly. "Senior year, the integrated living space design?" Of course I remembered. We'd spent 3 months developing a revolutionary concept for multifunctional furniture that could transform small spaces. Modular pieces that served multiple purposes. A complete rethinking of how people lived in urban environments. It had been brilliant, innovative, ahead of its time. "Professor Chen said it was graduate-level work," I whispered. "It was better than graduate-level work. It was market-ready. We could have patented it, started a company." Landon turned to face me fully. "But you dropped out of the program to marry Easton." The guilt I'd carried for 25 years pressed down on me like a physical weight. I'd abandoned our project, left Landon to complete it alone. He'd gotten full credit, but we both knew it had been a collaboration. "I'm sorry," I said, the words feeling inadequate. "I'm so sorry, Landon. I was young and scared and—" "Don't apologize," he said firmly. "I didn't bring it up to make you feel guilty. I brought it up because 6 months after you left, Easton started a furniture company. Crawford Designs. His first product line was remarkably similar to our project. The world seemed to tilt sideways. What are you saying?" "I'm saying your husband built his fortune on stolen ideas, Antoinette. Ideas you helped create." The memory came flooding back, Easton asking me about my classwork, showing interest in my projects for the first time since we'd started dating. I'd been so flattered by his attention, so eager to share my passion with him, that I'd shown him everything, every sketch, every prototype, every innovative concept I'd developed. He'd listened with such apparent fascination, asking detailed questions about materials and manufacturing processes. I'd thought he was trying to understand my world, trying to connect with the part of me he'd never shown much interest in before. Instead, he'd been stealing it. "The modular coffee table that launched his company," Landon continued quietly. "The one that could be reconfigured into a dining table and storage unit? That was your design, wasn't it?" It was. I'd sketched it during a late-night study session, frustrated by the limitations of my tiny apartment. Easton had found the sketch on my kitchen counter and studied it for nearly an hour, asking me to explain every detail. "He said he wanted to understand my work," I whispered, my voice breaking. "He said he was proud of my creativity." He was. Proud enough to claim it as his own. The betrayal hit me in waves. It wasn't just the humiliation in the ballroom tonight. It was 25 years of lies, 25 years of building a life on stolen dreams, 25 years of watching my husband take credit for my innovations while dismissing me as nothing more than a housewife. Every major breakthrough Crawford Designs has had, I said slowly, pieces clicking into place with horrible clarity. The expandable shelving system, the convertible workspace furniture, the eco-friendly material innovations. I helped develop all of those. I gave him the ideas, helped him work through the problems, and then he made you feel like you were lucky to be included in his success, Landon finished. Made you feel like your contributions were insignificant. I thought about all the times I'd tried to talk to Easton about design, about my ideas for improving his products or developing new ones. He'd listen with that patronizing smile, pat my hand, and tell me I didn't understand the business side of things. He'd made me feel stupid for having opinions about an industry I'd once dreamed of revolutionizing. Why didn't you say something? I asked. All these years, why didn't you tell me? Landon was quiet for a long moment. Because you chose him, he said simply. Because you seemed happy, and I didn't want to be the bitter ex who couldn't let go. Because I hoped, that maybe he really did love you enough to deserve you. And now? His smile was sad but determined. Now I know better. Tonight proved that he never understood what he had. He never saw you the way I saw you. The way I still see you. The way he still saw me. Present tense. After 25 years of silence, after building an empire while I disappeared into domestic invisibility, he still saw me as the woman I'd been, the woman I'd forgotten I could be. What am I supposed to do with this information, Landon? I can't just. I have children, a life, responsibilities. You have choices, he said gently. Maybe for the first time in 25 years you have real choices. Choices. The word felt foreign, dangerous. I'd spent so long following the path laid out for me that I'd forgotten there could be other paths. The offer I made in there, Landon continued, about us talking, about the future. I meant it, Antoinette. I've built something real over the past 25 years. I have resources, connections, opportunities. I could help you reclaim what's yours. Your marriage ended tonight, he said, not unkindly, but with absolute certainty. The moment Easton humiliated you in front of 200 people, the moment he reduced 25 years of partnership to diaper changing and charity, your marriage ended. The only question now is what comes next. What comes next? Another foreign concept. For 25 years, I'd known what came next. Another day of supporting Easton's dreams while burying my own. Another day of being grateful for scraps of attention from my own family. Another day of diminishing myself to make others comfortable. I need time, I said finally. I need to think. Landon reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a business card. Take all the time you need, but when you're ready to remember who you really are, call me. I took the card, my fingers brushing his in the exchange. The touch sent electricity through me, a reminder of feelings I'd spent 25 years suppressing. The woman who designed that lamp, he said softly. The woman who could see possibilities where others saw limitations. She's still in there, Antoinette. She's been waiting for someone to believe in her again. Believe in her. In me. When was the last time anyone, including myself, had believed in me? As Landon walked away, leaving me alone with the city lights and the weight of 25 years of revelations, I realized something that terrified and exhilarated me in equal measure. I wanted to remember who I really was. I wanted to find that woman again, even if it meant destroying everything I thought I knew about my life. The question was whether I had the courage to try. I didn't go home that night. I couldn't face Easton, couldn't stomach the thought of walking into our perfectly appointed house in Westfield Manor and pretending that everything was normal. Instead, I drove aimlessly through the city until I found myself parked outside the old Northwestern campus, staring at the building where I'd once believed I could change the world. My phone had been buzzing incessantly since I'd left the hotel. Easton, the children, even some of the guests from the party, probably calling to satisfy their curiosity about the drama they'd witnessed. I'd turned it off an hour ago, needing the silence to think. Landon's business card sat on my dashboard, catching the streetlight like a small beacon. I'd picked it up and put it down a dozen times, my finger hovering over his number. What would I even say? Thank you for destroying my marriage? Thank you for revealing that my entire adult life had been built on theft and lies? Thank you for reminding me who I used to be? When my phone finally rang at 7 in the morning, I almost didn't answer, but the caller ID showed Sarah's name, and something in me couldn't ignore my daughter, even now. Mom? Sarah's voice was small, uncertain. Where are you? Dad's been calling everyone, and Michael's freaking out, and what happened last night? I closed my eyes, feeling the weight of 23 years of motherhood pressing down on me. How could I explain this to my children? How could I tell them that their father had built their comfortable life on stolen dreams? That their mother had been complicit in her own erasure? I'm okay, sweetheart, I said finally. I just needed some time to think. But that man, the one who said those things about you and Dad, who was he? The one who said those things. Not the one who humiliated me. Landon was the one Sarah was questioning. Even now, even after witnessing Easton's cruelty, she was more concerned about the stranger who'd defended me than the father who'd torn me down. I'd raised them to see me as less than. I'd raised them to accept their father's version of reality where I was lucky to be included, grateful to be kept. The realization was devastating. Someone I knew a long time ago, I said carefully, before I married your father. Silence stretched between us. Then quietly, Are you coming home? Home. The word felt foreign now, charged with implications I wasn't ready to examine. Was that massive house in Westfield really home? Or was it just another beautiful prison I'd helped build around myself? I don't know yet, I admitted. Sarah was quiet for a long moment. Dad's really upset. He's been drinking since last night, and he keeps saying he's going to ruin that man's business. He called some lawyers and Uncle Richard and... She trailed off, probably realizing she was sharing information I might not want to hear. Uncle Richard, Easton's brother, the one with connections in every industry that mattered. Of course Easton would call in reinforcements. He'd never been one to accept defeat gracefully, and last night had been the first time in 25 years that someone had publicly challenged his narrative. Sarah, I said gently, I need you to understand something. Whatever happens between your father and me, it has nothing to do with you and Michael. You're both adults now, and this is between us. But Mom, I love you, I interrupted. I have always loved you. But I need some time to figure out what comes next. After I hung up, I sat in the car for another hour, watching students hurry across campus with their backpacks and coffee cups and urgent conversations. They looked so young, so full of possibility. Had I ever looked like that? Had I ever moved through the world with that kind of confident purpose? Yes, once. Before I'd learned to make myself smaller, before I'd convinced myself that dreams were luxuries I couldn't afford. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. I know you're struggling with all of this. When you're ready to hear the whole story, I'll be at the Meridian. Suite 1207. No pressure, no expectations, just truth. L. The whole story. What more could there possibly be? But even as I thought it, I knew I was going to go. I'd spent 25 years living with half-truths and carefully constructed narratives. If I was going to rebuild my life, if I was even going to understand what needed rebuilding, I needed to know everything. The elevator ride to the 12th floor felt endless. I'd changed clothes at a department store, trading my evening gown for simple jeans and a sweater. But I still felt exposed, vulnerable. What was I doing? What was I hoping to accomplish? Landon answered the door before I could knock, as if he'd been waiting by the window. He looked different in daylight, more human somehow. The silver in his hair was more pronounced, and there were lines around his eyes that spoke of years of hard work and responsibility. But his smile was the same, warm, genuine, touched with something that might have been relief. "Thank you for coming," he said simply, stepping aside to let me in. The suite was elegant, but not ostentatious, decorated in warm neutrals with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. A pot of coffee sat on the table, along with pastries from what I recognized as the hotel's signature bakery. He'd prepared for my visit without being presumptuous about it. "I wasn't sure you would," he continued, gesturing for me to sit wherever I was comfortable. I chose the chair by the window, needing the light and the view to ground me. "I almost didn't. This is complicated." "It doesn't have to be." Landon sat across from me, leaving plenty of space between us. "I'm not trying to complicate your life, Antoinette. I'm trying to simplify it." "By telling me my marriage was built on stolen ideas? By declaring your feelings in front of 200 people? That's simplifying?" He had the grace to look embarrassed. "The declaration wasn't planned. Seeing him humiliate you like that, I lost my temper. It wasn't my finest moment." "But you meant it. What you said about waiting 25 years. It wasn't really a question, but he answered anyway. Every word. The honesty in his voice sent a shock through me. After years of Easton's calculated responses, his careful management of every conversation, Landon's directness was almost overwhelming. "Why?" I asked. "You could have had anyone. You built an empire. You're successful, powerful. Why hold on to feelings for someone who rejected you?" Landon was quiet for a long moment, looking out at the city. When he spoke, his voice was soft but certain. "Do you remember the night before you accepted Easton's proposal? We were in your apartment, working on the lighting project. You'd been struggling with the power distribution problem for weeks." I remembered. I'd been frustrated to the point of tears, convinced that my design was fundamentally flawed. "You were about to give up," Landon continued. "You said it was impossible, that you weren't smart enough to solve it. And then you had that moment of inspiration, the cascade design that would distribute power through multiple pathways. Do you remember what you said when it finally worked?" I did remember. I'd been so excited, so proud of the breakthrough. I said it felt like flying. "You said it felt like flying," he repeated, and I realized that I wanted to spend the rest of my life watching you have those moments. I wanted to be there every time you figured out something impossible, every time you created something beautiful. I wanted to build a life around your dreams taking flight. The memory was so vivid I could almost smell the coffee we'd been drinking, could almost feel the excitement that had coursed through me when the design finally came together. It had been one of the last times I'd felt that way, truly alive, truly myself. "But you chose safety instead," Landon said, not accusingly, but with deep sadness. "And I understood why. Easton offered you security, certainty. I was offering you. Well, I was offering you a leap of faith." "I was scared," I whispered. "I was 21 and terrified of making the wrong choice." "I know. And I've spent 25 years wondering if I could have made it easier for you. If I could have offered you more security, more certainty. If I could have convinced you that taking the leap was worth it." "You never tried to contact me. After I got engaged, you just disappeared." Landon's smile was rueful. "I went to Europe, spent 5 years working for design firms in Milan and Barcelona, trying to forget you. It didn't work, but it did teach me a lot about business, about building something from nothing. When I came back to the States, I was determined to create the kind of success that would have made you proud to choose me. And then I realized that building an empire out of wounded pride was a hollow victory. I had everything I thought I wanted, But I was still missing the one thing that mattered. The one thing that mattered. Me. He was talking about me as if I was something precious, something worth waiting for. After years of being treated as an afterthought, as lucky to be kept, the attention was almost dizzying. Landon, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest. He nodded, his expression serious. Last night, when you said Easton built his business on our ideas, how much of his success actually came from my work? Landon hesitated, and I knew the answer was going to be worse than I'd imagined. All of it, he said finally. Every breakthrough product Crawford Designs has launched in the past 25 years originated from concepts you developed, either from our college work or from ideas you shared with him during your marriage. The room seemed to spin around me. All of it. Not just the original modular furniture line, but everything. The expandable shelving that had made Crawford Designs a household name. The eco-friendly materials that had won them industry awards. The space-saving solutions that had revolutionized urban living. All mine. All stolen. How do you know that? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Because I've been watching Crawford Designs for 25 years, waiting to see if Easton would ever create something original. He never did. Every innovation he claimed was a variation on work you'd already done. Sometimes he changed the materials or modified the proportions, but the core concepts were always yours. But how could you possibly know? Because I kept copies of everything we worked on together. Every sketch, every prototype, every brainstorming session. I told myself it was for professional reference, but really, I couldn't let go of the last pieces of you I had. He stood and walked to a sleek briefcase by the window, withdrawing a thick portfolio. When he set it on the coffee table between us, my breath caught. It was my old sketch pad from senior year, the one I'd thought was lost in the chaos of moving out of my dorm. The leather cover was worn soft with age, but I recognized every scuff and stain. You kept this? I whispered, reaching out to touch the familiar surface. I kept everything, Landon said quietly, including the original design for the lamp that started it all, the one Professor Williams called revolutionary, the one that became the basis for Easton's first product line. I opened the portfolio with trembling hands, and 25 years of suppressed memories came flooding back. Page after page of detailed sketches, concept drawings, innovative solutions to design problems that wouldn't become industry standard for years. Work I'd poured my heart and soul into. Work I'd been so proud of. Work I'd convinced myself had been meaningless amateur efforts. He made me believe I was nothing, I said, tears blurring my vision as I turned the pages. He made me believe these were just silly student projects. They weren't silly, they were brilliant, and they made him rich. Rich on my ideas, successful on my innovations, respected for stealing my dreams. What am I supposed to do with this information? I asked, looking up at Landon through my tears. Sue him? Destroy my children's father? Blow up my entire life for revenge? I'm not asking you to destroy anything, Landon said gently. I'm asking you to reclaim what's yours. The ideas, yes, but more than that. I'm asking you to reclaim yourself. Reclaim myself. The woman who'd designed these innovations, who'd seen possibilities where others saw limitations. The woman who'd felt like she was flying when a complex problem finally yielded to her imagination. How? I asked. How do you reclaim 25 years of lost identity? Landon leaned forward, his eyes intense. You start creating again. You remember what it felt like to solve impossible problems. You let yourself dream big again. I'm 56 years old, Landon. I've been out of the design world for decades. Technology has changed. Markets have evolved. Design is design, he interrupted. Good ideas are timeless. And you. He reached across the table and covered my hand with his. You were always the most innovative thinker I knew. That doesn't just disappear. His touch was warm, solid, real. For the first time in years, I felt like someone was seeing me, really seeing me, not as a wife or mother or convenient accessory, but as myself. "I have an offer for you," Landon said, his voice steady and sure. "Not a romantic proposition, not a rescue mission. A business opportunity." I raised an eyebrow, curious despite my emotional upheaval. "I'm launching a new division of Blackwood Hotels, sustainable design consulting. Hotels around the world are demanding eco-friendly, space-efficient solutions, but most design firms are still thinking in outdated paradigms. I need someone who can revolutionize how we approach hospitality spaces." My heart began to pound. "You're offering me a job?" "I'm offering you a partnership. 50-50 ownership of the new division, full creative control, a chance to see your ideas implemented on a global scale." His grip on my hand tightened slightly. A chance to show the world what Antoinette Crawford can really do. A partnership, creative control, global scale. The words sent electricity through me, awakening something that had been dormant for so long I'd forgotten it existed. "The salary would be $200,000 to start," Landon continued, "plus profit sharing once we're established. But more importantly, you'd own your work. Every design, every innovation, every breakthrough, it would be yours. Legally, publicly, permanently yours. Own my work." After 25 years of watching Easton profit from my ideas, the concept felt revolutionary. "I can't," I said automatically, the response so ingrained I didn't even think about it. "I mean, I have responsibilities, obligations." "To whom?" Landon asked quietly. "To the husband who humiliated you publicly? To the children who are adults with their own lives? To yourself?" To myself. When was the last time I'd had an obligation to myself? "I need time," I said. But even as I spoke the words, I could feel something shifting inside me. A spark of the old excitement, the old hunger to create something meaningful. "Take all the time you need," Landon said. "But while you're thinking, consider this. Right now, Easton is probably planning how to discredit me, how to minimize what happened last night. He's going to try to convince everyone, including you, that I'm just a bitter man trying to steal his wife." "Aren't you?" I asked, but without accusation. I genuinely wanted to know. Landon's smile was sad but honest. "Maybe partly, but mostly, I'm a businessman who recognizes exceptional talent when I see it. And I'm someone who believes that 25 years is long enough for brilliance to stay buried." Long enough for brilliance to stay buried. The phrase resonated through me like a bell. How long was I willing to keep burying who I really was? How long was I willing to let fear keep me small? "There's something else you should know," Landon said, releasing my hand and reaching for another folder. "About what Easton's planning to do next." My stomach clenched. "What do you mean?" "My security team picked up some interesting phone calls from your house last night. Calls to his lawyer, his brother, some business associates. He's not planning to apologize or try to win you back, Antoinette. He's planning to destroy you." "Destroy me how?" Landon's expression was grim. "He's going to claim you're having a mental breakdown, that you're emotionally unstable, possibly dangerous. He's going to use last night as evidence that you need psychiatric help, that you can't be trusted to make rational decisions about your future." The words hit me like ice water. Of course. Of course Easton wouldn't just let me walk away. He'd turn my moment of strength into evidence of weakness, my first act of self-preservation into proof of instability. "He can't do that," I said, but my voice sounded uncertain even to myself. "He can try. And if he succeeds, if he convinces a judge that you're mentally incompetent, he could gain control over your assets, your medical care, your entire life. You'd become his ward, legally obligated to submit to whatever treatment he deems necessary." The horror of it crashed over me. Not just divorce, not just humiliation, but complete legal subjugation. Easton wouldn't just take my past, he'd steal my future too. "But if you had your own income, your own professional identity, your own legal standing. Landon let the implication hang in the air. You're saying I need to move fast. I'm saying you need to choose who you're going to be. The woman who lets herself be destroyed by a man who never deserved her, or the woman who takes back everything he stole and builds something even better. I looked down at the portfolio again, at years of work I'd forgotten I was capable of. Then I looked at Landon, at the man who'd kept faith with my potential even when I'd lost faith in myself. For the first time in 25 years, I knew exactly what I needed to do. The only question was whether I had the courage to do it. I drove home to Westfield Manor in a daze, Landon's portfolio carefully secured in my passenger seat like precious cargo. The familiar tree-lined streets seemed different somehow, smaller, as if I was seeing them through new eyes. The massive houses with their perfect lawns and pristine facades looked less like dreams fulfilled and more like beautiful prisons. Our house, Easton's house, I corrected myself, sat at the end of a curved driveway, all Georgian columns and manicured hedges. I'd once been so proud of this place, so grateful that Easton's success had allowed us to live here. Now I wondered how many of my stolen ideas had paid for those marble steps, those hand-carved moldings, that 3-car garage. Easton's Mercedes was in the driveway, along with his brother Richard's silver BMW. Of course, Richard was here. The cavalry had arrived to help Easton manage the crisis of his wife developing a backbone. I sat in my car for several minutes, gripping the steering wheel and trying to gather my courage. Through the large front windows, I could see movement in the living room. 2 figures pacing, gesturing, planning. Planning what to do about me, no doubt. My phone buzzed with another text from Sarah. Dad says you've been acting strange lately. Are you okay? Should I come home? Acting strange. Already the narrative was shifting, just as Landon had predicted. Easton was laying the groundwork for his mental instability defense, preparing to paint my moment of clarity as evidence of breakdown. I turned off the car and gathered my resolve. If I was going to do this, if I was really going to reclaim my life, I needed to move fast. Easton had 25 years of experience managing me, controlling the story, making me doubt my own perceptions. I couldn't let him do it again. The front door was unlocked, as always. Easton had never worried about security in our wealthy neighborhood. Why would he? He'd never had anything to fear from the person who posed the greatest threat to his carefully constructed life. Antoinette. His voice called from the living room before I'd even closed the door. Is that you? Yes, I called back, surprised by how steady my voice sounded. It's me. I found them in the living room, Easton and Richard seated across from each other like generals planning a campaign. Papers were spread across the coffee table, legal documents by the look of them. They both looked up when I entered, their expressions a careful mixture of concern and assessment. Sweetheart, Easton said, rising to his feet with the kind of solicitous manner one might use with an invalid. We've been so worried about you when you didn't come home last night. I needed time to think, I said simply, staying near the doorway. I didn't want to get trapped in the middle of the room, surrounded by their careful manipulation. Richard stood as well, his expression professionally sympathetic. As Easton's lawyer brother, he'd had plenty of practice managing difficult situations. Antoinette, I think we should talk about what happened last night. Easton's told me about the incident at the party. The incident? Already my humiliation was being reframed as something I'd caused, something that needed to be managed rather than addressed. Has he? I asked, looking between the two men. And what exactly did he tell you? Easton's jaw tightened slightly. I told him about Landon Blackwood's inappropriate behavior, how he inserted himself into our celebration, made those ridiculous claims about your past relationship. Ridiculous claims? I repeated, feeling that familiar cold anger settling in my chest. Which part was ridiculous, Easton? The part where he said he loved me or the part where he said I was talented? Antoinette, Richard began, but I cut him off. No. I want to hear from my husband. I want to hear him explain which part of what Landon said was ridiculous. Easton's mask of concern slipped slightly, revealing the irritation underneath. The man is obviously unstable. He's been fixated on you for 25 years, building some kind of fantasy around a college relationship that ended decades ago. A fantasy, I said slowly. So when he said I was a talented designer, that was fantasy. You took a few art classes, Easton said dismissively. It's hardly the foundation for a career. A few art classes. I felt the familiar sting of his casual dismissal, but this time it was accompanied by something else. Clarity. For the first time, I could see exactly what he was doing, how he minimized my accomplishments to maintain his own superiority. Industrial design, I corrected. I was studying industrial design. I was good at it. Richard cleared his throat uncomfortably. Perhaps we should focus on the present situation. Antoinette, we're concerned that this man might be trying to manipulate you, to take advantage of what was obviously an emotional moment. Take advantage. Of course that was their interpretation. It couldn't be that someone genuinely valued me, genuinely saw potential in me. It had to be manipulation, exploitation. He offered me a job, I said quietly. The silence that followed was deafening. Easton's face went through several expressions: surprise, disbelief, anger, before settling on condescending amusement. A job? He laughed, and the sound was sharp, cutting. Sweetheart, you haven't worked in 25 years. What kind of job could you possibly be qualified for? There it was. The casual cruelty that had become so familiar I'd stopped noticing it. The automatic assumption that I was useless, unemployable, dependent on his charity for survival. A design position, I said, my voice gaining strength. A partnership, actually, in sustainable hospitality design. Richard and Easton exchanged a look, one of those male glances that said clearly what they thought about my intelligence, my judgment, my ability to assess reality. Antoinette, Richard said gently, I think you need to consider the possibility that this man is not being entirely honest with you. Men like Blackwood don't offer partnerships to people without extensive professional experience. Men like Blackwood, successful men who built real empires, who made real decisions. Unlike women like me, who just changed diapers and got lucky. Unless, Easton added, his voice taking on a nastier edge, he's not really interested in your design skills. The implication hung in the air like a toxic cloud. Of course that was what they'd assume, that any interest in me had to be sexual, predatory, inappropriate. The idea that I might have actual value, actual talent worth investing in, was apparently too far-fetched to consider. You think he offered me a partnership because he wants to sleep with me? I asked, my voice dangerously quiet. I think, Easton said carefully, that you're emotionally vulnerable right now, and that men like Blackwood are experts at exploiting that vulnerability. Exploiting vulnerability. Everything about this conversation was about my weakness, my susceptibility, my inability to think clearly or protect myself. They weren't discussing my humiliation at the party, Easton's public cruelty, or the problems in our marriage. They were focused entirely on managing the threat I apparently posed to their carefully ordered world. What would you like me to do? I asked, curious to hear their plan. Richard leaned forward, his expression earnest and professional. We think you should consider getting some help. You've been under a lot of stress lately, and last night was obviously traumatic. There are excellent facilities that specialize in helping people work through these kinds of episodes. Episodes? There was the word Landon had warned me about. My moment of self-respect was being reframed as a mental health crisis requiring professional intervention. What kind of facilities? I asked, though I already knew the answer. Residential treatment centers, Richard said smoothly. Places where you could get the support you need to work through whatever you're going through. away from external pressures and influences that might be confusing you. Away from Landon, away from anyone who might remind me that I had options, that I deserved better, that I was worth more than Easton's version of charity. "How long would this treatment last?" I asked. Easton and Richard exchanged another look. "As long as necessary," Easton said. "Until you're feeling more like yourself again." More like myself. The irony was breathtaking. They wanted to send me away until I was willing to be the diminished version of myself they were comfortable with. Until I stopped remembering that I used to have dreams, used to have talent, used to believe I could fly. And if I refuse? The silence stretched uncomfortably. Finally, Richard spoke. "Antoinette, if you're not capable of making rational decisions about your own well-being, then the people who love you have to step in." There it was. The threat Landon had predicted, delivered with lawyerly precision. Submit to treatment voluntarily, or they'd have me declared incompetent and force me into it. I looked around the living room, at the expensive furniture I'd helped choose, the artwork we'd collected together, the family photos that documented 25 years of carefully curated happiness. None of it felt like mine anymore. It all felt like props in someone else's life, someone else's story. "I need to get a few things from upstairs," I said finally. "Of course," Easton said, his relief evident. He thought I was surrendering, accepting their assessment of my mental state. "Take your time. We can discuss the details when you're ready." I walked upstairs slowly, my mind racing. They were giving me rope, expecting me to hang myself with compliance. Instead, I was going to use it to climb out of the hole they'd spent 25 years digging for me. In our bedroom, Easton's bedroom, really, since I'd never been allowed to decorate it the way I wanted, I pulled out a small suitcase and began packing carefully. Not too much, nothing that would suggest I wasn't coming back. Just enough to survive for a few days while I figured out my next move. At the bottom of my jewelry box, hidden beneath layers of rarely worn accessories, I found my original Northwestern student ID. The photo showed a young woman with bright eyes and confident posture, someone who believed she could change the world through good design, someone who'd never learned to make herself smaller. I tucked the ID into my purse along with Landon's business card and my old portfolio. Then I sat at the small writing desk by the window and composed 2 letters. The first was for my children. Michael and Sarah. By the time you read this, I'll have made a choice that might be difficult for you to understand. Your father will probably tell you that I'm having some kind of breakdown, that I need help. I want you to know that I've never been thinking more clearly. I'm not abandoning you. I'm not choosing someone else over our family. I'm choosing myself for the first time in 25 years. I'm choosing to remember who I was before I learned to disappear. I love you both more than words can express. But I can't keep living as half a person, and I can't keep pretending that diminishing myself is the same thing as keeping our family together. I hope someday you'll understand. I hope someday you'll be proud of me for finding the courage to fly again. All my love, Mom. The second letter was shorter, addressed to Easton. I accept your job offer. When you're ready to discuss the terms of our partnership, you know how to reach me. A. But that letter wasn't for Easton. It was for Landon. I sealed both letters, left the first on my pillow and tucked the second into my purse. Then I picked up my suitcase, took one last look around the room that had never really felt like mine, and walked downstairs. Easton and Richard were still in the living room, their legal documents spread across the coffee table like battle plans. "All set?" Easton asked, looking up with that patronizing smile I'd once found comforting. "Yes," I said. "I think I am." I walked to the front door, my heart pounding so hard I was sure they could hear it. Any second now, one of them would ask where I was going, would notice that I was carrying a suitcase instead of just grabbing my purse. But they didn't. They were so certain of my compliance, so confident in their assessment of my limitations. that it never occurred to them that I might have my own plan. "Antoinette?" Easton called as I reached for the door handle. I turned, expecting to be caught, expecting to have to fight my way out. "Drive carefully," he said, "and call us when you get to the facility. We want to know you've arrived safely." I nodded, not trusting my voice. Then I walked out the front door of the house I'd called home for 25 years, got into my car, and drove away from everything I'd ever known. I didn't look back. For the first time in my adult life, I didn't look back. The drive to the Meridian Hotel felt like flying. When I knocked on the door of Suite 1207, Landon answered immediately, as if he'd been waiting by the window again. His expression shifted from hope to concern when he saw my suitcase. "Are you all right?" he asked, stepping aside to let me in. I set down my suitcase and reached into my purse, pulling out the letter I'd written. "I accept your job offer," I said, handing it to him. "When can I start?" Landon read the letter, his expression shifting to something that might have been wonder. "Are you sure about this? Once we move forward, there's no going back. Easton will fight this with everything he has." "I know," I said, "but I'm tired of being afraid. I'm tired of being small. I'm tired of pretending that I'm grateful to be kept when I should have been building something of my own all along." Landon smiled. Not the careful professional smile he'd worn during our business discussions, but something warm and real and full of possibilities. "In that case," he said, "welcome to Blackwood Design Partners. I think we're going to build something extraordinary together." Something extraordinary. After 25 years of being told I was ordinary at best, the words felt like a promise and a challenge rolled into one. 3 weeks after I walked out of Easton's carefully controlled world, I was sitting in the bright, modern office space that Landon had secured for Blackwood Design Partners. Sunlight streamed through floor-to-ceiling windows, illuminating the drafting tables and computer workstations that would soon house our revolutionary approach to sustainable hospitality design. I'd been working 16-hour days, partly because I was genuinely excited about the projects we were developing, but mostly because I was terrified that if I stopped moving, I'd lose my nerve and crawl back to the safety of my old life. The transformation had been swift and stunning. In just 3 weeks, I'd designed a modular hotel room system that could reduce construction costs by 30% while increasing energy efficiency by nearly half. The prototype had hotel executives flying in from around the world to see what we were creating. But success, I was learning, came with a price. My phone had been ringing constantly since the first industry article about Blackwood Design Partners had been published. Not with congratulations or business inquiries, but with increasingly frantic calls from Easton. I'd stopped answering after the first few conversations made it clear that he wasn't interested in reconciliation. He was focused entirely on damage control. This morning's voicemail had been particularly venomous. "You think you can just walk away and play businesswoman? You think that man actually cares about your pathetic little sketches? I built everything you're trying to destroy, Antoinette. Everything. And I'm not going to let you take it away." I was reviewing the latest designs for our Singapore project when Sarah knocked on my office door. I looked up, surprised to see her. We'd spoken on the phone several times since I'd left, but she'd never visited my new workplace. "Mom?" She stood uncertainly in the doorway, looking younger than her 20 years. "Do you have a minute?" "Of course, sweetheart. Come in." I gestured to the comfortable chairs by the window, clearing away the architectural drawings that covered every surface. Sarah sat down carefully, her designer purse clutched in her lap like a shield. She was dressed in the kind of expensive casual wear that screamed private college student, clothes that Easton's stolen success had purchased. "I've been talking to Dad," she began, and I felt my stomach clench. "He's really worried about you, about this whole situation." "I'm sure he is," I said carefully. "What exactly has he told you?" Sarah shifted uncomfortably. "He says you're having some kind of midlife crisis, that this man Landon is taking advantage of you." That you're going to lose everything you've worked for. Everything I'd worked for. The irony was breathtaking. And what do you think? I don't know what to think, Sarah said, her voice small. This place is amazing, and you seem different, happier. But Dad says you're making a huge mistake, that you're destroying our family for some fantasy. Our family. I studied my daughter's face, seeing echoes of my own features mixed with Easton's stronger jawline. Sarah, do you remember much about me from when you were little? She frowned. What do you mean? Do you remember me ever working? Ever having interests outside of taking care of you and your brother? You volunteered at our schools. You organized charity events. You managed the household. But do you remember me ever creating anything? Ever pursuing my own dreams? Sarah was quiet for a long moment. No, she said finally. But that's what mothers do, right? They sacrifice for their families. Sacrifice for their families. There was the lesson I'd taught her without meaning to, that women existed to serve others, that our own dreams were luxuries we couldn't afford. Sarah, I need to tell you something about your father's business, about how Crawford Designs really started. Over the next hour, I showed her everything. The original portfolio Landon had preserved, the timeline of Easton's innovations compared to my college work, the undeniable evidence that Crawford Designs had been built on stolen ideas. Sarah went through several emotional stages as the truth sank in: disbelief, anger, confusion, and finally, a kind of numb acceptance. All of it? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Everything he built came from your work? Not everything, I said gently. Your father is a talented businessman, a skilled marketer. He knew how to take good ideas and turn them into successful products. But the ideas themselves, yes, they were mine. Sarah stared at the sketches spread across my desk, her face pale. Why didn't you ever say anything? Why didn't you fight for credit? Because I believed him when he said I was lucky to be included. Because I thought supporting his success was more important than claiming my own. Because I was young and scared, and I'd been taught that good wives don't compete with their husbands. But now you're competing with him, Sarah said, and there was something in her voice I couldn't quite identify. Now I'm finally being myself, I corrected. For the first time in 25 years, I'm using my talents for my own benefit instead of someone else's. Sarah was quiet for several minutes, studying the designs with new understanding. These are really yours? All of them? Every sketch, every concept, every innovation that made your father's fortune. I paused, choosing my words carefully. Sarah, I need you to understand something. I'm not trying to hurt your father, and I'm not trying to destroy your security. But I can't keep living as half a person just to preserve everyone else's comfort. What about us? Sarah asked, and now I could hear the fear underneath her composure. What about me and Michael? If you're right about this, if Dad's business really is based on stolen ideas, what happens to our future? It was a fair question, and one I'd been grappling with since I'd made my choice. I don't know, I admitted, but I do know that building your future on lies is no foundation at all. Before Sarah could respond, my phone rang. Landon's name appeared on the caller ID, and I could see from his expression through the glass wall of his office that something was wrong. Excuse me, I told Sarah, then answered the call. What is it? Antoinette, you need to come to my office immediately. We have a problem. I found Landon pacing behind his desk, his usual composed demeanor replaced by something approaching agitation. Sarah had followed me, hovering in the doorway uncertainly. What's wrong? I asked. Landon gestured to his computer screen, which displayed what looked like a legal document. Easton filed an injunction this morning. He's claiming that all the design work you've done for Blackwood Partners is stolen intellectual property that belongs to Crawford Designs. My blood turned to ice. He can't do that. Those designs are completely original. He's claiming they're derivative of work you did during your marriage, which under California law would make them community property. He's arguing that since you were unemployed and he was your sole source of financial support, any intellectual property you developed during the marriage belongs to both of you. But that's insane. I never worked on these specific projects during our marriage. It doesn't matter, Landon said grimly. He doesn't have to prove the designs are identical. He just has to demonstrate that they're based on techniques and concepts you developed while married to him. And given that your original portfolio clearly shows the foundation for everything you're doing now. The implications hit me like a physical blow. Easton wasn't just trying to hurt me, he was trying to steal my work again. Even now, even after everything, he was attempting to claim ownership of my creativity. There's more, Landon continued. He's also filed for an emergency restraining order, claiming you're mentally unstable and that I'm manipulating you into making decisions that are harmful to your well-being and your family's financial security. Sarah gasped from the doorway. I'd forgotten she was there, forgotten that she was witnessing her parents' marriage implode in real time. What does that mean? I asked, though I was afraid I already knew. It means that until the court hearing next week, you're legally prohibited from making any business decisions or entering into any new contracts. It also means that if the judge rules in his favor, you could be forced to return all compensation you've received from Blackwood Partners and undergo psychiatric evaluation. The room seemed to spin around me. In one brilliant legal maneuver, Easton had managed to paint me as both a thief and a madwoman. If he succeeded, I'd lose everything. My newfound career, my financial independence, possibly even my freedom. Mom, Sarah said softly from the doorway, and I turned to look at her. Is this why you left? Because you knew he would do something like this? I thought about her question, about the pattern of control and manipulation that had characterized my entire marriage. Not specifically, I said, but yes, I knew that Easton would never let me go without a fight. I knew he'd try to destroy me rather than face the truth about what he'd done. Sarah walked into the office and sat down heavily in one of the chairs. I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me. I nodded, bracing myself. Are you in love with Landon? The question caught me off guard. Not because it was inappropriate, but because I hadn't allowed myself to examine it carefully. I don't know, I said finally. I know that he sees me as a person worth respecting, worth investing in. I know that he makes me feel capable and valuable in ways I'd forgotten were possible, whether that's love or just gratitude. I honestly can't tell anymore. Landon cleared his throat uncomfortably. Perhaps I should give you two some privacy. No, Sarah said firmly. You should hear this too. She turned to face me fully. Mom, I've been watching Dad for the past 3 weeks since you left. He's been drinking more, staying up all night making phone calls, obsessing over ways to get back at you and Landon. He's not acting like a man who's lost the love of his life. He's acting like someone who's lost control of his property. The observation was so perceptive, so mature, that I felt a surge of pride even in the middle of my crisis. What are you saying? I'm saying that maybe it's time someone in our family chose truth over comfort. Sarah's voice was steadier now, more certain. Maybe it's time someone stood up to Dad instead of just enabling his behavior. I stared at my daughter, seeing her clearly for perhaps the first time in years. She wasn't just the spoiled college student I'd thought she was. She was a young woman capable of making hard choices, of seeing uncomfortable truths. Sarah, if I fight this, if I refuse to back down, things are going to get very ugly very quickly. Your father has resources, connections, legal expertise. He's going to make this as public and as painful as possible. I know, Sarah said simply. But Mom, I've seen your work over the past hour. I've seen what you're creating here. It's extraordinary. It's the kind of innovation that could change entire industries. Are you really going to let Dad steal that too? Let Dad steal that too. The phrase hit me like a revelation. This wasn't just about my current projects or my partnership with Landon. This was about whether I was going to spend the rest of my life letting Easton claim ownership of my creativity, my intelligence, my very identity. I looked at Landon, who had been watching this conversation with something that might have been amazement. What are our chances if we fight this? Honestly, it depends on the judge, on how well Easton's lawyers present their case, on whether we can demonstrate that your current work is substantially different from your original designs. He paused. But Antoinette, even if we lose in court, even if you have to walk away from this partnership, you'll have proven something important. Which is that you're not the helpless, dependent woman he's been telling everyone you are, that you're capable of building something significant on your own, that you're worth fighting for, even if you have to do the fighting yourself. Worth fighting for. After 25 years of accepting whatever scraps of respect Easton was willing to offer, the concept felt revolutionary. I thought about the young woman in those college sketches, the one who'd believed she could change the world through good design. I thought about the mother I wanted Sarah to become. Strong, independent, unafraid to claim her own worth. I thought about the woman I'd glimpsed in the mirror this morning, confident and purposeful in a way I hadn't been since I was 21. Then we fight, I said, my voice steady and sure. We fight with everything we have. Sarah smiled, the first genuine smile I'd seen from her in years. Good. And Mom, for what it's worth, I think you're going to win. As I looked at my daughter and my business partner, at the innovative designs covering every surface of our bright office, I realized something that filled me with quiet joy. I'd already won. Regardless of what happened in court, regardless of Easton's threats and manipulations, I'd already reclaimed the most important thing of all. The courthouse on that Tuesday morning looked like any other municipal building, gray stone, imposing columns, the kind of architecture designed to remind ordinary people that they were entering a place of serious business. But as I walked up those steps with Landon beside me, I felt anything but ordinary. I was wearing a navy blue suit I'd bought specifically for this hearing, the first professional clothing I'd purchased in 25 years. My hair was pulled back in a sleek chignon, and I carried a leather briefcase that contained not just legal documents, but every piece of evidence that proved who I really was. Easton was already there when we entered the courtroom, flanked by his team of expensive lawyers. Richard sat behind him, along with several business associates whose presence was clearly meant to demonstrate the serious financial interests at stake. They all looked supremely confident, like men who had never doubted their right to win. Easton caught my eye and smiled. That same patronizing smile I'd endured for 25 years. It was meant to remind me that I was out of my league, that I should be grateful he was willing to take me back after my little rebellion. Instead, it reminded me of everything I was fighting against. Judge Patricia Holloway was a woman in her early 60s with sharp eyes and graying hair pulled back in a no-nonsense style. She reviewed the preliminary documents with the kind of focused attention that suggested she wasn't easily impressed by legal theatrics. "This is an unusual case," she said, looking up from her papers. "We have a request for an injunction claiming theft of intellectual property, combined with allegations of mental incapacity. Mr. Crawford, you're claiming that your wife's current business activities constitute theft of marital assets?" Easton's lead attorney, a sleek man named Harrison Weber, stood to address the court. "Yes, Your Honor, Mrs. Crawford has taken proprietary design concepts developed during the course of her 25-year marriage and used them to benefit a competing business enterprise. Under California community property law, those concepts belong equally to both spouses. And you're also claiming that Mrs. Crawford lacks the mental capacity to make these business decisions. We're concerned about Mrs. Crawford's emotional state, Your Honor. She abandoned her family home without warning, entered into business partnerships with a man she barely knows, and has been making increasingly erratic decisions. We believe she may be experiencing a psychological crisis that's affecting her judgment. I felt my lawyer, Janet Morrison, tense beside me. We'd prepared for this line of attack, but hearing it stated so clinically in open court was still jarring. "Mrs. Morrison," Judge Holloway said, "how does your client respond to these allegations?" Janet stood with quiet confidence. She was a woman about my age who'd built her reputation defending professionals in intellectual property disputes. "Your Honor, Mrs. Crawford is not mentally incapacitated, nor has she stolen anyone's intellectual property. What she has done is finally reclaim her own creative work after 25 years of watching her husband profit from her ideas." "That's a serious counter-allegation," the judge noted. "You're claiming that Mr. Crawford built his business on his wife's designs?" "We are, Your Honor, and we have extensive documentation to prove it." What followed was the most surreal hour of my life. Janet methodically presented the evidence we'd prepared, my original college portfolio, the timeline of Crawford Designs product launches, testimony from Professor Williams who remembered my work from Northwestern, even statements from former Crawford Designs employees who confirmed that I'd been the source of many innovative concepts over the years. Watching Easton's face as the truth unfolded was both satisfying and heartbreaking. He'd clearly expected this to be a simple matter of asserting male authority over a wayward wife. The idea that I might have legal standing, might have evidence, might actually be telling the truth, was obviously something his lawyers hadn't prepared him for. But the most important moment came when Judge Holloway asked me to address the court directly. "Mrs. Crawford," she said, "I'd like to hear from you personally. Can you explain to the court why you left your marriage and entered into this business partnership?" I stood slowly, my heart pounding but my voice steady. "Your Honor, I left my marriage because I realized I'd been living as half a person for 25 years. I'd convinced myself that supporting my husband's dreams was the same thing as having dreams of my own. I'd accepted that being grateful for his success was enough, even when that success was built on my work." I paused, looking directly at Easton. For 25 years, I told myself that love meant sacrifice, that good wives don't compete with their husbands, that being kept was a privilege I should be grateful for. But that night at our anniversary party, when my husband publicly reduced my contributions to diaper changing and luck, I finally understood that I hadn't been loved. I'd been managed. Easton's lawyer started to object, but Judge Holloway waved him off. "Continue, Mrs. Crawford." "The business partnership I entered into with Mr. Blackwood isn't built on stolen ideas, Your Honor. It's built on the ideas I never got to develop because I was too busy supporting someone else's career. It's built on concepts I created after I left my marriage, using skills I'd forgotten I had. And yes, those skills were developed during my marriage, but they were developed by me. They're mine." I reached into my briefcase and pulled out a folder containing my most recent designs, the modular hotel system that was revolutionizing sustainable hospitality design. "These are the designs Mr. Crawford claims belong to him," I said, handing the folder to the judge. "They were created 3 weeks ago in my new office, using software I taught myself and concepts I developed independently. They bear no resemblance to anything in my original college work or anything Crawford Designs has ever produced. They are entirely my own creation." Judge Holloway examined the designs carefully, comparing them to the earlier work we'd submitted as evidence. After several minutes, she looked up. "Mr. Weber, can you point to any specific similarities between these current designs and the work your client claims ownership of?" Easton's lawyer shuffled through his papers, clearly struggling. "The techniques are similar, Your Honor. The underlying approach to space utilization, the sustainable materials focus—" "Those are industry standards," Judge Holloway interrupted. "Any competent designer would use those approaches. I'm asking about specific design elements that demonstrate actual theft of intellectual property." Weber consulted with his team for several minutes before admitting, "The designs are substantially different in their specifics, Your Honor." "I see." Judge Holloway turned to me. Mrs. Crawford, regarding the allegations of mental incapacity, how do you respond? This was the moment I'd been both dreading and anticipating. Your Honor, if recognizing my own worth constitutes mental illness, then I suppose I'm guilty as charged. If leaving a marriage where I was treated as decorative property rather than a partner constitutes instability, then I accept that label. But if we're defining mental health as the ability to think clearly, make rational decisions, and pursue meaningful work, then I've never been healthier in my life. I gestured toward the courtroom where several hotel executives had come to observe the proceedings. In the 3 weeks since I left my marriage, I've designed a revolutionary hospitality system that's already attracted international attention. I've established professional relationships with industry leaders who value my expertise. I've created more innovative work than I produced in the previous 25 years combined. That's not the behavior of someone who's mentally incapacitated. Judge Holloway was quiet for several minutes, reviewing all the evidence we'd presented. Finally, she looked up. Mr. Crawford, she said, addressing Easton directly. I've reviewed the evidence presented by both sides. While it's clear that your wife did contribute significantly to your business success over the years, it's also clear that her current work represents original creation, not theft of existing intellectual property. Do you have any evidence that contradicts this assessment? Easton stood slowly, his confidence finally cracking. Your Honor, my wife is. She's not the same person she was. This man has filled her head with ideas about independence and careers. She's 56 years old. It's too late for her to start over. The words hung in the air like a confession. There it was. Easton's real concern wasn't about stolen property or mental illness. It was about control. It was about a woman who dared to claim her own life at an age when he believed she should be grateful for whatever he was willing to give her. Mr. Crawford, Judge Holloway said quietly, the court's job is not to determine whether your wife's life choices are wise or appropriate. The court's job is to determine whether she's legally competent to make those choices and whether she's committed any crimes in doing so. She paused, her expression stern. Based on the evidence presented today, I find that Mrs. Crawford is clearly competent to make her own business decisions. I also find that there's no evidence she's committed theft of intellectual property. Her current work, while building on skills developed during her marriage, represents original creation that she owns independently. I felt my knees almost buckle with relief. Janet squeezed my arm supportively. Therefore, the judge continued, the request for an injunction is denied. The request for psychiatric evaluation is denied. Mrs. Crawford is free to continue her business partnership and retain any compensation she's received. She looked directly at Easton. Mr. Crawford, I strongly advise you to consider whether pursuing this matter further is in anyone's best interest. The evidence suggests that your wife's contributions to your business success were far greater than you've acknowledged. Continuing to challenge her right to independent success could result in uncomfortable questions about the true origins of your own wealth. The threat was subtle but unmistakable. If Easton kept pushing, the court might start examining just how much of Crawford Designs really belonged to him. As we left the courthouse, I felt something I hadn't experienced in 25 years. Complete, unqualified victory. Not just legal victory, but personal vindication. A public acknowledgement that I was capable, competent, valuable. Sarah was waiting for us on the courthouse steps, having driven down from college to hear the verdict. When she saw my expression, she smiled. The same bright, confident smile I'd had at her age, before I'd learned to dim my own light. "How did it go?" she asked, though my face probably told her everything she needed to know. "Your mother," Landon said, his voice warm with admiration, "was magnificent." Later that evening, I stood on the balcony of my new apartment overlooking downtown, a glass of champagne in my hand, and the lights of the city spread out below me like scattered stars. It was a modest place compared to the mansion in Westfield Manor, but it was mine. Every piece of furniture, every decoration, every choice reflected my taste, rather than someone else's vision of who I should be. My phone had been ringing all afternoon with congratulations from colleagues, interview requests from industry publications, and business proposals from hotels around the world who'd heard about our innovative approach to sustainable design. The woman who'd once been dismissed as unemployable was now being courted by Fortune 500 companies. But the call that meant the most had come from Michael, my son, who'd been silent through most of the divorce proceedings. "Mom," he'd said, his voice quiet but certain, "I owe you an apology. I've been talking to Sarah about everything that happened, about Dad's business and your work, and I'm sorry. I'm sorry I didn't see it sooner. I'm sorry I didn't stand up for you." "You don't need to apologize," I'd told him. "You were raised to see me a certain way. We all were. But I should have looked closer. I should have asked questions. You're brilliant, Mom. You always were. I guess I never thought about where Dad's ideas really came from." Now, standing on my balcony, I thought about the young woman who'd designed that revolutionary lamp in college, who'd believed she could change the world through good design. She'd been buried for 25 years under layers of compromise and diminished expectations, but she'd never really died. She'd just been waiting. The door behind me opened, and Landon stepped onto the balcony carrying his own glass of champagne. We'd maintained strictly professional boundaries during the legal proceedings, but now, with the court case behind us and our partnership secure, we could finally acknowledge what had been building between us. "Penny for your thoughts," he said, moving to stand beside me at the railing. "I was thinking about time," I said, "about how 25 years seemed like such a long time to wait, but now it feels like preparation. Like everything I went through was teaching me to value what I have now." "And what do you have now?" I looked at him, this man who'd kept faith with my potential even when I'd lost faith in myself, then out at the city where I was building something entirely my own. "Everything," I said simply. "I have everything." Landon reached for my hand, and I didn't pull away. His touch was warm, solid, real, not the desperate grasping of someone trying to possess me, but the gentle connection of someone who valued who I was. Now I'm curious about you who listened to my story. What would you do if you were in my place? Have you ever been through something similar? Comment below, and meanwhile, I'm leaving on the final screen 2 other stories that are channel favorites, and they will definitely surprise you. Thank you for watching until here.